everybody. Welcome to I think it's our third First Friday that's virtual. So we just thank you. I'm Brian with Williamson Inc. And I'm excited about this morning's program. First of all, I'd like to introduce Sheila with Franklin Synergy Bank, which is our generous sponsor of First Friday this morning. So I'll kind of kick it over to Sheila to share some words about what you do at Franklin Synergy and how you can help those that are on our webinar today.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sheila Gilliland, and I'm with Franklin Synergy Bank's Treasury Management Department. So they've asked me to tell you exactly what a Treasury Department does. So before you go get another cup of coffee because you think Treasury doesn't involve you, I wanted to tell you that all it is cash management, actually. So cash management is something that every business deals with every single day. And it's just how you move money around the cash cycle. The number one most important thing is how you collect your cash. So the Treasury Department works with clients to help them accelerate their receivables. You know, think of ways that you collect, cash, checks, credit cards, ACH, automatic clearinghouse payments, wire transfers. So we look at all the ways that you can try to collect funds faster so that you have use of those funds. And then another component is, what do you do with the funds when you have them on hand? Can you earn some interest on those funds or use them to pay down some debt, possibly? One thing I'm a big proponent of is how do you protect your funds when the funds are in your account? So financial service institutions provide a service called Positive Pay, and it's available for companies that issue checks as well as electronic transactions through their account. So Positive Pay helps you prevent fraud before it ever happens. So I'm a very big advocate of that. And then the final component, of course, is your disbursements, paying your vendors, your payroll, covering your payroll and all that. So we want to slow down that part of the cycle and let you hold on to your cash as long as you can. So we have effective ways of making payments just last minute. ACH is available next day. Now some transactions can be same day. So the cost over sending a wire transfer at the last minute, sometimes can be mitigated by using ACH. So what we really do is we look at those components of a business's cash cycle, try to accelerate the receivables, keep the money safe while you've got it, make it work for you, and then also to pay it out more effectively so that you can hold on to that cash. So that is what the Treasury Management Department does. And I just wanted to share that with you. And Brian, I'll kick it back to you.
Sure. Sheila, how can people contact you if they had more questions or wanted to connect with Franklin Synergy?
Sure. So our main office is on Columbia Avenue there downtown. Feel free to call. If you'd like to call me directly or the Treasury Department, you can just dial 615-478-2055 or best to call at this point because there's not a lot of walk-in traffic at the branches. They're all open now, but we'd be glad to help you.
Great, thank you. Thank you to Franklin Synergy Bank. For those of you that may not know, they are a huge asset to Williamson County, but also the state of Tennessee, but they're very generous to many organizations throughout the state. They also are a lender, and so if you're looking for small business loans, paycheck protection, assistance, reach out to Franklin Synergy Bank for those resources as well. So again, thank you to Franklin Synergy for your support to First Friday. Thank you, Sheila. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, now I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Steve Anderson. I've actually known Steve for over 12 years. He and his daughter and I used to work together years ago, and known he and his wife Karen for years, and they're local downtown Franklin residents, have been for many years. And Steve has written a book, and some of you may have heard of this book, but it's called The Bezos Letters, and it's 14 principles to grow your business like Amazon. And I don't know if you're like me, but pretty much every day there's a little truck that seems to arrive at our house and drop off boxes. Yesterday I had 2 kayaks arrive. So sitting at home has resorted in some online shopping. So
you and a lot of people, Brian.
Yeah, certainly there's a lot to learn from what's happening at Amazon. And so just wanted to turn it over and introduce Steve. For those of you that are on the webinar, if you have questions throughout, please just put it in the Q&A section or the chat section, and I will do my best to interject and ask Steve those questions as we go. So just know that we'll verbally answer those. I won't be answering them in text via the chat and the Q&A, but please do, we welcome your questions just as we do when we have our first Friday in person. So without further ado, Steve, I'll just kick it over to you.
Brian, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here on First Friday with everybody. So January 27th, 1967 is probably not a date that you remember, but I remember it well. On that date, 3 astronauts entered an elevator on the gantry that took them to the top of a Saturn V rocket into the Apollo 1 command module. It was the first Apollo launch in about 2 weeks, and they were doing a full test. Unfortunately, a few minutes later, a spark ignited the 100% oxygen atmosphere, and we lost those 3 astronauts within minutes. It was something that shook NASA to its core, and a very impressionable 13-year-old. I happened to be living in Washington, D.C., and convinced my mom a few days later to actually let me skip school and drive me to Arlington Cemetery, where I participated in the burial of 2 of those astronauts. As I said, it shook NASA to its core. And I'll come back to explain why I talk about that in just a minute. 25 years ago, a Wall Street financial analyst was researching the internet and discovered that internet usage was increasing at 2,300% per year. And he started asking the question, what kind of business could I create that would take advantage of this kind of growth? Well, as you suspect, it was Jeff Bezos, and Amazon is the business that he came up with, starting with books, selling through a website. That site opened, became live in July of 1995. And the thing I want to emphasize is that Jeff Bezos started Amazon literally on his hands and knees, taking books that he had gotten from a warehouse, a local warehouse, packaging them up, putting them in the back of his car, and driving them to the post office. We forget, given Amazon's success today, that he started just like every one of you who started a business. The question is, are there things we can learn from what Amazon has done over the years? Well, I believe they are, and that is the core idea of the book that I wrote and published. But I want to do a couple of indicators of success, as I call it, because we certainly know how big Amazon is, and we know how rich Jeff Bezos is, and all of those indicators. But we've got some other ones here. Amazon was the fastest company to reach $100 billion in sales. A Wall Street Journal and Drucker Institute, Peter Drucker, a very famous management expert and author, for the last several years have done an analysis of the top 250 well-managed companies. And in 2018, Amazon was number 1. In 2020, Amazon was number 2. And the rankings are made up of 37 different indicators of success. So it's a broad range, not just financial success. And then LinkedIn, where people want to work, analyzing the job market on LinkedIn in 2020, Amazon was number 3. 1, where people wanted to work, and 2, how long they've stayed there. And then finally, American Consumer Satisfaction Index, top score since 2010. Now, let me also say, I realize people have a wide variety of opinions about Amazon. Some people love Amazon. Some people hate Amazon. Some people think Jeff Bezos is great. Some people think Jeff Bezos isn't very great. I'm not here to be their judge and jury. but I do believe, based on my research, that there are things that we can learn from Amazon, regardless of how you actually feel about them. So I'd ask you for the next little bit that you put that feeling aside and think about with me what some of those principles that Bezos has used to grow Amazon are, and more importantly, are there some principles that could help you in your business today? Well, I did an analysis of Jeff Bezos at the time, 21 letters to share owners, that he started writing actually the first letter in 1997. They had gone public in that year, and his first letter to share holders, actually what he began later calling share owners. In that analysis, I realized that there was patterns throughout those letters of how he described what Amazon core principles, mindset, and thought process was. And so I uncovered 14 principles that I have grouped into 4 cycles that I believe has helped Amazon grow. Now, I come out of the insurance industry, and risk management has been a core of what I've done for years. What I also realized is that taking risk is at the core of how Amazon has grown. And in fact, I call Jeff Bezos the master of risk. So we'll talk a bit more about that. So here you can see the 4 cycles: test, build, accelerate, and scale, with the principles grouped in each of those. So we're going to take a look at a couple of those as we go through this morning. The first cycle is test. Every business tests. Testing new products, new services, new platforms, new ways of engaging with customers. And 3 of the principles in that cycle are encourage successful failure, bet on big ideas, and practice dynamic invention and innovation. We hear a lot about the need for innovation today, and it is true. Technology is continuing to develop at a rapid pace, and in fact, kind of what started me along this path was this idea that the biggest risk a business faces today may actually be not taking enough risk. And so every organization says they want or need innovation, but what they communicate to employees is you better be right. And in fact, I'm absolutely think that employees don't fear failure. They actually fear the consequences of failure. So principle number 1, encourage successful failure. Typically not words you hear together, successful and failure. And that brings me back to Apollo 13 and the Apollo program. So I mentioned Apollo 1, 3 astronauts killed, shook NASA to its core, a true tragedy. But what it also did was help NASA understand that they had to change how they do things. In July of 1969, we all know Apollo 11 landed on the moon with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Apollo 13 launched in April of 1970, actually celebrated the 50th anniversary of that just a couple of months ago. And Apollo 13 took off on the top of a Saturn V. Now, I just added this. This is the Falcon launch last weekend, sending 2 astronauts into space for the first time in 11 years from US soil. 56 hours after the Apollo 13 launch, during a routine cryo stir, an oxygen tank exploded and crippled the service module. There's a picture of it. And we've all probably remember the story because of the movie Apollo 13 by Ron Howard. Well, great movie. At the end of that movie, after the astronauts have landed back in the ocean, they have been rescued. They're taken out of the ocean on a helicopter, and they were landing on the deck of the Iwo Jima. And Tom Hanks, playing Jim Lovell, narrates as they're walking off the helicopter that our mission became known as NASA's most successful failure. Well, that concept really grabbed me and intrigued me. One, because I am a space geek and I just love all of the stuff going on now, but also from my risk management background, how can you have successful failures? Well, I came to realize that Amazon thinks that way. And without the failure and tragedy of Apollo 1, Apollo 13 would not have been successful in getting those 3 astronauts back alive. Well, Bezos talks a lot about failure throughout the letters. Long quote, I know. I've highlighted in bold some of the key ideas here. If the size of your failures isn't growing, you're not going to be inventing at a scale that can actually move the needle. Large-scale risk-taking is part of the service we, Amazon, as a large company, can provide to our customers and society. And a single big winning bet can more than cover the cost of many losers. And so a successful failure mindset are at least these 3, right? Scale your failures so you can scale your growth. Large-scale risk-taking can be a service, and a big bet can cover the cost of many losers. And Amazon probably has failed more than they've had successes. I'll just highlight one. In 2014, Jeff Bezos got on stage, sort of mimicking Steve Jobs, and announced the Amazon Fire phone. I doubt any of you even remember that Amazon actually had a phone. The reason? Nobody bought it. At one point, they lowered the price of the phone to 99 cents, and they couldn't give it away. Huge failure, and at the end of 2014, they ended up writing off over $178 million in inventory and development costs. Failure. Here's a success. 4 or 5 months after the Fire phone was announced by Jeff Bezos, he saw the first demonstration of what you would come to know as the Echo and Alexa, marrying a hardware device using voice, learning from the phone, and machine learning Alexa together to be able to answer those questions that you can today. I think you'd agree Alexa has become one of those big bets that covers many losses. So successful failure. Here's just a few other quotes I'm just putting up quickly that he talks about their approach to successes and failures. And so one of the key takeaways here is, for your business, what is your company's employee award for the most successful failure? How are you building into your culture at your business this idea that we can test, we can experiment, we invent, and then we can innovate? Now, I want to pause here a second because I usually get the question, what does that actually mean? And I want to emphasize the idea that at Amazon, they have an intolerance for incompetence. This is not willy-nilly, let's throw it against the wall and see what happens. This is strategic. This is thinking through what could be the possible pluses and minuses for whatever it is that we're looking at. And they have put in place a number of tools that they use to help them make sure their experiments are a success. But again, an experiment by its very nature means that you could fail. And so that's the idea behind encourage successful failure. And again, builders, lots of quotes here that I use, but look at this: invent, launch, reinvent, relaunch, start over, rinse, repeat again and again. That is the process to come up with those big ideas that actually move the needle. So real quick, the second one, and I've sort of touched on it, so we'll just spend a minute. Practice dynamic invention and innovation. Now, in my view, there is so much conversation around businesses needing to innovate. I think that's out of order. My order is business need to experiment. So you need to not need more innovation, you need more experimentation, which leads to invention, which allows you actually to innovate within your business. And this is regardless. You could be innovating service offerings, you could be innovating platforms that you create for clients, you could be innovating actual physical products. It doesn't matter. But every employee at Amazon is expected to experiment with improving their piece of the business there. I believe Amazon is an invention factory. And in fact, I did a lot of reading and research about Thomas Edison. I think one of his greatest offerings to us was this idea of an invention factory, not just some buddy sitting on their own. He actually had over 35 full-time employees who experimented every day, and we know what he came up with. So we must be committed to constant improvement, experimentation. Another quick example of that, this is a picture of Amazon's physical retail location called an Amazon Go store. I took this picture, I was in Chicago, and I've been to a couple of these stores. What's unique? They set out to solve one of the biggest problems in retail, one of the biggest irritations, checking out. I mean, I can think about going to grocery stores or waiting in line at Target or right for checking out and paying for what that you have. At an Amazon Go store, you scan your app to get in, the door's open. They track you inside. You pick what you want off the shelves. You can see normal chips and drinks and prepared sandwiches, etc. And you literally just walk out. There is no cashier because it is tracking yourself, what you pull off the shelf, and adding that to your virtual cart. And then a few minutes later, you get your receipt as an email. Invention on behalf of the customer. That technology has been developing over 5 years. This is the Amazon Go grocery store, over 10,000 square feet in Seattle, just opened a few months ago. And taking that same concept, and even more importantly, I think, Amazon is making that available and licensing it to other retailers to take advantage. Remember, inventing at a scale where we can provide a service to other businesses. So again, pioneers, we've seen some of that before. Let me go into the second cycle, build. Now that we've tested, we want to build on our successes. And the first principle in this cycle is obsess over customers. Now, every business owner thinks about customers, right? They're key to what you do. But we think about it in terms of customer service or customer experience or customer focus or the customer journey. At Amazon, it's obsessing over customers. And there's just a different mindset there when you think about obsession. It is single focused. It is only looking at the customer. For Amazon, it means starting with the customer and working from there. And I've used this phrase already, inventing on behalf of the customer, even when they don't know they wanted it. Amazon Prime is a great example. They kept adding to it. Why obsess over customers? Because one of the big friction points in online sales was paying shipping. They decided we're going to pay shipping for people so they will buy more. And by the way, that does happen. So at Amazon, there are 3 customer pillars that they look at: wide selection, low prices, and fast delivery. These may not be your customer pillars, by the way. It may not be low prices. That may not be your focus. But Bezos talks about in one of his letters, I can't imagine a day that our customers will want less selection, higher prices, and slower delivery. And when you look at what Amazon's doing, it really is back to this core of taking care of their customers. Now, one of the things that I did come up with is that looking at businesses as they grow is that one of the biggest risks a successful company faces is actually their success, because they start looking at protecting what got them there, not experimenting with what the next phase is and might be. These pictures here that I'm going to put up, I took at Green Hills Mall. These are 4 online retailers, and literally I stood in one place at the mall and took these pictures of these 4 retail locations that all started as online only. What's interesting to me, and we're seeing that even now over the last few months, that merging of clicks and bricks, right? Online and physical. Walmart and Target had huge increases in sales of people who went online to purchase and then went to the store to either pick up or have brought out to their car. You can see here Warby Parker, Indochino, glasses for Warby Parker. Indochino is custom suits at off-the-rack pricing. Untuckit shirts and Casper for sleeves. Those are the number of retail locations they've opened in the last few years. So retail's not dying, but the experience you create for your customer when you are obsessed with them and inventing on their behalf changes. And that is how retail is being successful as we move forward. Now, I have this, and I'm going to put this up pretty quick here for you. But I call it the client value matrix. As we think about our customers and what it means to obsess over them and how we interact with them, I have found this to be helpful to explain. You see the 2 axes, maintenance and profitability. And so in the bottom right, you have high maintenance and low profitability clients. I call those the dogs. The top right, you have high maintenance but high profitability. Those are the question marks. You know, they're bringing in lots of profitability to your organization, but are they worth it? And then bottom left, you have low maintenance and low profitability. With some attention, could they become your stars? And then finally, the top left, high profitability and low maintenance, your cash cows. So how do you deal with them? Well, you fire your dogs, you invest in your stars, you move your question marks, and finally, you focus on your cash cows. All too often, those cash cows, because they're low maintenance, we don't focus on them enough. So just a way to think about your customers and how you go about engaging with them. And this is Bezos in his 1998 letter. And the core here is, I remind our employees to wake up every morning terrified, not of our competition, but of our customers. Because later in that quote, you'll see, they are loyal to us right up until the second that someone else gives them better service. And that is a mindset at Amazon, and that goes into that idea of customer obsession. So the third growth cycle is accelerate. We've tested, we're building, now we're accelerating. And how we do that. You can see the 4 principles that are part of this particular cycle. We're going to take a look briefly at generate high velocity decisions. One of the keys at Amazon, and we really saw this a lot over the last 3 months, is their ability to move quickly. And it's at its core, this idea of generate high velocity decisions. Bezos talks a lot about decision making, and especially in his 2015 letter. And he categorizes decisions at Amazon into 2 types, type 1 and type 2. Type 1 decisions here are consequential and irreversible or nearly irreversible. They're one-way doors. We make those decisions methodically, carefully, slowly, with great deliberation and consultation. He calls those type 1 decisions. Big decisions, hard to reverse, bet the farm. You better be as right as you can possibly be. One of the examples of those is choosing the HQ2, their second headquarters. Again, over a long period of time, took in lots of data, made a very intentional decision. But he goes on to say, most decisions at a company aren't like that. Most decisions are changeable and reversible. They're two-way doors. Again, this idea, if I walk through that door and it's a type 2 decision, I can look and say, I don't like this. I don't think we did this right. Let's go back. Let's change. Let's make another decision, but make it quickly once we realize this isn't the way we want to go. You can reopen and go back through that door. Type 2 decisions should be made quickly by high judgment individuals or small groups. That's a real key idea there. And again, small groups, I don't have time to go in depth, but at Amazon, that's called 2 pizza teams. A team of people should only be as big as 2 large pizzas can feed, because that team should have the responsibility and the capability and the judgment to make those decisions on behalf of the organization as a whole. So what are some key points here for high velocity decisions? First, never use a one-size-fits-all. One of the things Bezos says that happens as companies grow is that they tend to move type 2 decisions to a type 1 process. Think about it. You've either maybe experienced or been a part of multiple layers of approval. We have to get to my supervisor, and that person has to go to the department manager, and the department manager has to go to the divisional VP, and the divisional VP excuse me, has to go to the executive committee. Whatever that process is, the only thing that does is slow down decision making. And slow decision making is one of the things that will kill a successful company. Number 2, decide at only 70% of the information you wish you had. You'll never have enough information, and if you wait till 90%, you're waiting too long. Action is a key idea here. You move with as much information as you can based, again, on your judgment. And the third key point at Amazon, at least, is disagree and commit. What they mean by that is you don't wait for 100% buy-in. You don't wait for everybody to say, yeah, that's a great idea, let's move forward. He gives an example in his letter where the Amazon Studios, right, Prime Video, was looking to fund a new show. They brought it to Bezos for his approval. He said, I don't think this show is going to be a success. But I also know your group has had many successes. So if you think this is going to be a success, I disagree with that decision, but I commit 100% to support you in any way that I can. Think about that. Think about how much faster things could move if your organization could disagree and commit. And Bezos said, I hope I'm wrong. I hope this show becomes the most watched show ever. And I will support you in any way I can. That's the core of high velocity decisions and what happens there. Now, I will say at this point, a lot of these principles aren't just about the principle, but they're about the culture. They're about the change management that needs to go on in your organization. And that becomes a key. One of the tools, and I don't have time to go too deep into it, that Amazon uses in this arena is called a 6-page memo. You see, at Amazon, Jeff Bezos actually banned PowerPoint and keynote presentations. You will never see a slide presentation at Amazon for any meeting or any decision, because he feels that that is a way to hide. And in fact, the best way to work out an idea is to actually write it out. Hence the 6-page memo. Typically starts with what's called a future press release. They actually write the press release. Let's take Alexa and Amazon Echo. They wrote out a press release the day that service was going to be announced, detailing the benefits, maybe I think you can see to who, the customers, of having this device. They then did a FAQ. What are all the questions that are going to come up? And then other supporting documentation is necessary. That is a printed memo, physically printed out. It is not sent out before the meeting, and everyone comes into the meeting. That memo is handed out, and the first 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes of that meeting is every person in that meeting reading the memo, writing down their questions, you know, asking, what about this? Have you thought about this? I don't see it here. And then literally when everybody is on the same page, they open it up for discussion. It's an amazing process. I've actually done it myself for a project I've been working on over the last few months. It's an amazing process to bring out discussion. So anyway, 6-page memo, really interesting process there. All right, so next, our final cycle, our scale. So we had test, build, accelerate, and now we're going to scale. And this is where so many businesses have trouble. How do you scale to a larger organization? Well, you can see some of the principles here. The one I want to focus in on is measure what matters, question what's measured, and trust your gut. Principle 13. Amazon is a data and analytics driven company. They measure absolutely everything. And you experience that whenever you're on their site, right? People like you purchase things like this. All of that comes out of the analytics. But Bezos also says you've got to understand that question what you're measuring. Is the data actually telling you what you think it is? He calls it anecdotal information. And in fact, in his 2005 letter, he actually published an email, jeff@amazon.com. By the way, it's still active. You can email that, issue problem question to that email address. He used to answer them himself. He doesn't do that anymore. But what he said was, if we're getting emails questioning a process or a problem or something's not right, if our data says it can't be, then we start questioning what we're measuring. Are we measuring the right thing? And so that anecdotal information will direct what they look at and what they experience. Bezos is fairly famous for forwarding one of those emails with a single letter to the head of the department in charge of whatever that problem might have been. That single letter is a question mark. And you drop everything when you get a question mark email from Jeff Bezos trying to figure out, why is this customer having this particular problem? Well, we've gone through a lot of principles, the 4 cycles. I've actually created an assessment to help you understand where you and your organization might fit and might benefit most from where to start with these principles. You can see it up there on your screen, the bezosletters.com/growth, or if you want to use text, you can text the word growth to 615-823-8228. No cost, no obligation. You'll get a report back giving you my assessment of where your organization might benefit from these principles. Well, as I mentioned earlier, one of the questions that really started me on this journey was, what if the biggest risk an organization, a business, is actually not taking enough risk? And I want to end with principle 14 because it really is key to thinking like Amazon. Believe it's always day one. So in the 2016 letter, Bezos writes, and actually was asked at an all-hands meeting, Jeff, what does day 2 look like? So day 1 has been a concept from the absolute very beginning. And you can see here, he's writing this in his letters. I work in an Amazon building named Day 1, and when I moved buildings, I took the name with me. I spend time thinking about this topic. This is the plaque in the Day One building. That's the main headquarters in Seattle. This is, again, a picture I took where Bezos has his office. And again, you can see the quote, Day One, there's still so much stuff that has yet to be invented. So he answers that question by saying Day Two is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And that is why it's always Day One. He goes on to say, I'm also interested in the question, how do you fend off Day Two? What are techniques and tactics? How do you keep the vitality of Day One even inside a large organization? And again, think about that first day you opened your business. You were excited, customers coming, you had worked hard to get where you are, you continue to work to keep where you're going. When you walk into your business this morning, are you thinking this is Day One? Or are you thinking, it's just another day? You see, all of the companies that I examined who are no longer here, BlackBerry, Blockbuster, Sears, had that Day Two thinking. So what are some of the, as he calls it, essentials for Day One defense? You might expect customer obsession. A skeptical view of proxies, meaning, has anybody ever told you that you had customer service? We don't do it that way. Our procedures don't allow this. That's a skeptical view of proxies. When a procedure overshadows customer obsession, you need to change the procedure or look at it. Number three, eager adoption of external trends. Key, what's out there that's going to impact us? Again, think about your own business in the last 3 months that we've been through. How are customers going to change? Are they going to come back into your physical retail location, or is Zoom or some video going to be the norm as we move forward? I think work from home is one of those external trends that is not going away. It's not going to be 100%, but it's not going away. We've had a shift. I like to say we've experienced 5 years of change in about 3 months, and some of that's permanent. And then 4, as I've already talked, high velocity decision making, default to taking action as you move forward. So Bezos was extremely savvy when it came to growing Amazon. He knew there was an exquisite tension between risk and growth. And for me, that is the core idea that I explore in the book, The Bezos Letters. So again, 4 cycles, 14 principles: test, build, accelerate, scale. Your business is likely in multiple cycles. You could have one part of it in test, another part in build, and another part in scale. But I believe this is a way to think about how to adopt and look at the principles Amazon has used to grow and apply them to your own business. Well, I'm honored, thrilled, actually surprised that the book, again, USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestseller. And also you can see 8 book covers of foreign language editions that have already been published, and there are about another 4 or 5 that are coming up in the next few months. If you're interested in the book, you certainly can buy it wherever you normally buy books. And also, I love supporting local businesses. So Landmark Booksellers in downtown Franklin has a small supply of books that I walked over yesterday and signed. So they're author signed books there at Landmark. So feel free to stop in and talk to Joel there. And with that, Brian, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I have not looked at any questions, so I'm going to rely on you to, and I realized, Brian, I was going to stop at some of those points, but I just kept going. So sorry about that.
Hey, that was excellent. Thank you, Steve, for all of that. I don't know about all of you, but it's like I just kind of want to be Steve's neighbor at this point and just front porch and talk. We do have some questions, and I wanted just to highlight a couple things. I love, you said it in the beginning, just the need for innovation. And certainly that's been a hot topic for us in light of the economy, with everything closing down and then, reopening and all of that. And you said something that resonated with me, is like, really the risk is not taking enough risk. And that kind of tied into, your first point of encouraging successful failure. But my question is, how do you change the existing business culture? So, you've got a business, you've got a certain culture that you've ingrained, but now you're saying, we really want to, implement some successful failure with y'all. How do you do that?
It's hard. And certainly employees probably aren't going to believe you. So a couple ideas. One, it's got to come from top down. And as a business owner, again, however big that is, big or small, you talk about, here are some things I tried that didn't work, but here's what I learned from it. So opening up the possibility, and it's kind of the old, I would say old idea, but suggestion box. But frankly, could you, one, let people take an idea and run with it? That's what happens at Amazon. Anybody at Amazon can propose a change, a new idea. And if it's validated, they actually may end up running that, I won't call it a division, but spearheading that change within the organization. So one, culturally, it's going to take some time, especially if there's been a culture in your organization of not encouraging people to experiment. And I think that's key, and asking employees, okay, what about your job should we change? What's not working? What do you think could do better? I have found over years of consulting with small businesses that employees often have great ideas if you can encourage them. And, there are a handful of businesses now that actually, reward employees either with, kind of a one-time a bonus or days off or things like that. Or if it's a big enough change, actually a profit piece of the benefit, right? The additional reduction in expenses or the additional profitability coming in. That will go a long way communicating clearly and probably quickly to all employees that this is a serious change.
That's great. Another question that we've just gotten is, do you believe all these principles apply to all businesses, and why?
I think some principles probably are more applicable to others, and I'm going to go ahead and put this slide back up. So I guess a couple things. One of the surprises of the feedback I've gotten from the book is how different types of businesses are applying it. Two examples. One is I've heard from several nonprofit executives that the principles can apply and they are changing their mindset within their own nonprofit organization. The second one that was surprising was a business friend who sent me an email and said, our church is going through strategic planning and thinking about where we want to go forward, and your book has been very helpful to help us think differently about what that might look like. So those are kind of two examples. Will every principle apply equally? Maybe not. However, I would encourage you to spend some time thinking about how they might apply.
So that ties into this next question that we just got. It says, I love these principles. If one of these principles does not seem to be working for my company, does that mean that we've not waited long enough, or does it mean that we aren't doing it right?
So again, I go back to, you know what, if it doesn't appear to be working, focus on the other ones that are. 14 is a lot. You can't do everything at once. And so focus on the areas, dare I say, experiment. Go back to, okay, we think this is working. Let's put our time, effort, and energy into this principle, be it obsess over customers or, I would say one of the ones, and I'll interject this now, that I get asked often, is there one principle that's kind of key? And that's like asking me which of my grandchildren I love best. I picked 14 for a reason. However, I think the one that I don't talk about very often and I don't get a lot of questions about is in the build cycle, understand your flywheel. And if I had to pick one, I would say that's probably the most important, but also the hardest to understand and implement. So very briefly, Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, published in the fall of 2001, chapter 8 talks about the flywheel and the doom loop. You probably have it on your bookshelf. Pull it out, take a look at that chapter again. How it relates to Amazon is Collins was brought into Amazon's senior leadership team in August of 2001, just before that book was published. And he spent a whole day just talking about the flywheel concept. And Amazon, the senior leadership team, that day and a couple of subsequent days actually created Amazon's flywheel. And that has been something that has been the core of what Amazon has built since then. And in fact, Bezos, for about 5, 6, 7 years, didn't want anybody to talk about it because he felt that was their secret sauce. So I kind of encourage you to spend a little bit of time thinking about your flywheel in your business. And again, it's not going to be Amazon's flywheel. It's going to be your flywheel. And Collins wrote what he calls a, mimeograph. I can't remember, a short book. It's only about 45 pages, but he delves into the flywheel and gives some examples. And actually one of them, the examples, is a elementary school principal that applied the flywheel to her school to increase student test scores. That's a long answer to that, Brian, but.
Okay, that's okay. We have another question, and you kind of answered it, but it says, how long do you give an idea to test on the market until you decide it's a failure or kill it?
Again, I'll go back to Amazon, and I'm just writing about this, but Amazon just killed a product, and they do it all the time. It's called the Echo Show Live, and it was basically, you could take pictures of yourself, and they would have machine learning capabilities that would, one, record what you wore if you wanted to keep track. Two, give you suggestions on other outfits that based on what you've already worn, other outfits. Well, they announced that in July that's shutting down, and they do that all the time. What their criteria is that 6-page memo, by the way, that was the foundation of creating that product. Whatever the criteria they put in there wasn't being met, and so for me, because I track it, but Amazon's famous for killing products. And I would say the moment you realize this isn't working, kill it. So don't wait too long, but give it enough time. That's sort of the bet on big ideas. Give it enough time. I go back to Amazon Go convenience store. That was 5+ years now of experimentation. They're keeping going, and because they think it's going to be able to scale.
That's great. Well, I can tell you why that Echo thing failed with telling you what to wear every day, because I'm wearing pretty much the same outfit every day. So,
not a lot of variety, Brian?
Not a lot of variety in what I'm wearing. This is great, Steve. I just have one last question, because I know it's top of mind for all of us, just in terms of most of us are working remotely. We're not, in the office together innovating like we used to. But, really in your last point, you talked about scale. In all of that, with us having to pivot our businesses, be innovative, make quick decisions and change our business models. How do we maintain our culture through all that? And obviously Amazon's done it too, because in the last 3 months,
well,
good heavens.
Again, think about it. Amazon hired 175,000 people within probably 6 weeks.
Right.
They recently announced last week that they are offering 125,000 of those permanent full-time positions. By the way, that's an example of long-term thinking. Do they need them right now? Maybe, but they're thinking, okay, how has the market changed for online purchasing, and we're going to need those people again, back to those customer pillars, right? Fast delivery. So maintain culture is huge, especially when you scale, because often that can get lost. And again, Bezos talks a lot about culture, and he says culture, you don't create culture. Culture grows up out of the organization. And there are a couple things that Bezos does that I'll highlight. One I mentioned already. He started calling the shareholder letters, which is a standard phrase, and he started using the salutation, "Dear share owners," because he believes, again, back to one of the principles, which is, and I'm looking for, promote ownership, but he believes that owners think different than tenants. And so that simple word communicates a lot to employees and to shareholders. Another example of maintaining culture. Amazon is a very frugal organization. They don't spend very much money on stuff that doesn't directly impact, in their view, how they handle and obsess over customers. And so you will see throughout Amazon what are called door desks. Short history behind it. Early on, actually, when Bezos was on his hands and knees packing those books, the person next to him that was helping him, he said to him, we've got to get knee pads because my knees are killing me. And the guy looked over and said, we don't need knee pads, we need packing tables. And he looked and said, Bezos said, that's brilliant. And he went out and he realized he went to Home Depot and he realized he could buy a door core, right? And four by four pieces of wood and brackets and make a packing table. They're called door desks, and he still today has a door desk as a visible example of culture at Amazon of being frugal.
That's great. Well, Steve, I think if you could go, we're getting some questions on people who are wanting to see that assessment screen. Could you go back to that screen for everybody?
I certainly can.
And just so that everybody knows, we will share, this has been recorded and we'll be posting it on our website. Also a copy of this presentation we'll post there as well for all of you to access. But Steve, we just, again, thank you for your, obviously your wealth of knowledge. We're privileged to have you in our community, and those of you now see his face here, and you'll see him at the farmer's market, you see him downtown. Certainly tackle him to gain some of the knowledge that he's had from his research of Amazon and all of that. Also, thank you again to Franklin Synergy Bank for their generous sponsorship of First Friday and this event, and certainly reach out to Sheila or any of their staff should you all have any needs for your banking needs. And then just again, a plug to Landmark Booksellers. Go visit Joel and Carol downtown Franklin to get a copy of that signed book. If they sell out of them, which I hope they do, I guarantee that you can get some more. Steve will be able to.
I'll make sure that happens. Yeah, we can make that happen.
Steve may or may not live on the same street that Landmark Booksellers is on. So
yes, that is correct.
You can go to landmarkbooksellers.com or give Joel and Carol a call at 615-791-6400. So we certainly want to, even though we're talking about Amazon, I selfishly would prefer that you support local. So again, I just thank you for today. There were I have so many notes all over the board here, but I hope that everybody got great points out of this, and certainly will be obsessed with your customers and continuing to believe it's day one and operating from a lot of the principles and things that Steve shared today. So thank you again, Steve, for being here this morning. Thank you again to Franklin Synergy Bank, and we'll have all this posted on our website. So we thank you for attending. All right. Thank you, everyone.